Okay, so due to the excellent response that I got from the last one, and by that I mean 50 something views on YouTube, mostly because I had already recorded this one and I thought it was a good idea to do, and because Clarke Surrey responded on YouTube to the first one asking for a video tutorial, I figured, you know what, I like fans, I'm gonna, show them what's up. So the last one, which was the Art of Creating Art Part 1, got a couple of views on DeviantArt, and then it got a couple good views on YouTube. So here's the next one, the Art of Creating Art Part 2. This one, it's only 15 minutes because I really rushed through this piece of art. So I'm just going to play it here, not sped up at all. So it starts off, as you see, the two deviations that started this one, I call them deviations because I've been a DeviantArt fanatic for so long, really started it off was that one. But the start of this is you choose a theme. The first one I chose was fire. The next one I chose nature. It was, as you saw, orange and red, and then the next one was green. This one I decided I'd go for a bit of a nighttime urban feel because I've done a lot of photography like that, and I really like that style. So the first step is create a clouds layer with black and blue, and that'll be the background for the main part of the picture, which in the first one was the spikes, the second one was the hill, and the third one is going to be the spires. So that's the first step, is set that up. Then the next step you do is create a new fill layer with a pattern on it. This fill layer is going to basically be the design that covers the thing. In Mobius X terms, we call it scan lines, Mobius X being the art ring that I used to run with. But these are scan lines now, and I just throw them on, I rasterize it right now, and then I go and I put it to multiply. That way, all of those tones show up through it, and yet the scan lines you can still see are in black. That's the background now for my spires. So now that that's done, I'm actually going to do some more stuff to it later, but for right now, I'm making a new layer that's just to add a little bit more detail. This one is going to be basically a 50% gray, which I then extrude, and that'll create all these nice blocks that are coming out. It's going to look very urban. And this is the little thing that I found out. I think I'm going to do it later. I'm not sure whether this is it or whether it's the next section because I forgot. I recorded this like a while ago, but you see that's the extrude that I just did. And right now I'm setting it, so this is the underlaying extrude. I'm going to set it underneath the scan lines and then find a layer style that'll basically, have it show up but not show up. Basically a way that's going to add a little bit more detail to that background and spires. So, I think that one looks good. So, right now I'm just going to, leave it like that. And now comes the fun part, is making the clouds at the bottom, I think. Oh, wait, no. This is where I actually define the spires. Okay, as you see, this is, as it is right now, that's just a background. Now I make the spires, which is basically, how I do that is I make a shape. I would then polar coordinate it, so that way it'll go around and cover one half of the screen. This one didn't work so well, so I'm going to cancel this in a second and go back, move it, and try it again. But basically, now the way polar coordinate works is it works with the size and where the image is on screen. But basically, now, if you see, it's now covering over half the screen, including the entire top section. So now I do that, I'm going to free transform it a bit. That way now it'll just cover and it'll look like the spires that are coming through. So that works that way. And then what I do once I make that is I then make the bottom set, which is again same process. You just take a shape, you would then polar coordinate it and throw it underneath this time instead of over. So I just chose a really simple one that's going to be, just straight edges instead of nice fancy curves. Because, I mean, hell, it's going to be underneath something anyways. It's going to be underneath a design. And, you go polar to rectangular. And, yeah. Not in the right place. So moving it and going polar to rectangular. Come on. There we go. I'm saying come on to myself. That's what I'm looking for right there. I'll hit OK, flip it, free transform, vertical, move it down a bit, move it down some more, free transform it. That way it actually looks good, and right about there. Okay, so there's my spires, basically. And, okay, a little bit more. And there's my spires. Now, the way they are right now, they look pretty good on their own. But I really want to give this picture more detail. And right now, I'm just arranging the layers. That way, everything is now underneath the spires. I mean, underneath those two polar coordinated shapes. That way, it'll be pure black, and then all the detail in the middle. So, that's that. Now what I'm doing is I'm making another 50% gray layer, and this will be the start of my over details, which is basically all of the detailed stuff that's going to be put over the spires or under the spires. Right now I'm working on over. And the last two pictures I did, it was a nice cloud effect, which was an interesting process. I went render clouds, I sumi-i'd that, which made it basically pastels. So it was really, really solid whites and really solid blacks. And then what I did is I level-based extruded it, which basically pulled out the whites and pushed in the blacks. So it really gave this nice, neat cloud effect. But so for right now, what I'm actually doing here, though, is I'm making the clouds. I was planning on doing something similar, but then it didn't really work. As you can see, I already just sumi-i'd it, and I'm pushing up the contrast. Actually, no, I'm pushing up the contrast. Then I'm going to sumi-i'd it, and that'll really bring it out, make it, only like 3 or 4 tones. But it didn't really look the way I planned it. So, I believe, yeah, and now I'm going to just try it right there. I think that was a find edges, which I didn't really like all that much, but I'm going to just try extruding it anyways, just because you never know how things are going to look. I do a 10 pixel extrude, and that doesn't really look anything what I'm looking for. So I'm just going to keep playing around with it, because you never know what the hell is going to work and what's not going to work. So here I just take invert, and that looks good. I end up sticking with this because that fits the urban, night chaos, because that kind of looks like an aurora borealis or whatever the hell you want to call it. It just fits with the night theme. So I'm going to move that down, and now I put a layer on it. I mean, not a layer, a mask on it. That's going to fade it out going upwards. So only the bottom's going to be visible, and now I'm just moving it around to see what works, what looks good, what doesn't look good. And yeah, a lot of it is playing around. So you really, you make something, you run with it, you just try altering it in as many different ways as you possibly can. And that's pretty much one of the keys to abstract art. And then, of course, I rearrange that a bit, because I rearrange, and now I'm going to throw that one over on the top and long pause. But I'm not sure what I'm doing now. Oh, yeah, wait, I didn't want to do that. No, okay, there we go. Now what I'm doing is I'm stroking the top part, which is basically going to give it a border, a nice white border. I figured might be pretty good. It'll give it high contrast, which will suit the urban nighttime feel, especially because that overlay that I just made has some really nice high contrast to it as well. And then I give it a gradient overlay, which gives the effect of a background behind what looks like spires now. Before it just looked like some stuff on black. Now it actually looks like something that's on top of a background. So I'm now going to colorize it a bit, give it a nice purple shade for the nighttime, because a lot of people have the mistaking that night colors are blue. No, it's a lot of indigos and purples. So I set that up. Now it looks like really nice, and I know this because I do a lot of night photography. But so that background is now set up, and now what I'm going to do is add a little bit more detail to that background. I just made the vertical stripe layer, and it just happens to be baby blue and white because that's what I pulled the pattern from. But so I just rasterized it, desaturated it, and now I'm pushing up the contrast. That way, it'll make the whites whiter and the darks darker. So that way, when I go ahead and lighten it, you'll be able to only see the one stripes. And that right there is what I want. Now, what I do here is I want to make it like a Japanese sun thing, where it's, the lines are fanning out, zooming out in radial directions. That is a little bit of a tricky thing to do. You go right-click, perspective it, and this is going pretty fast because I've done this a lot. But you basically right-click, free transform, go right-click again, perspective, and then you can pull out the corners and it'll give it a perspective mode, in which it's fairly easy to make this thing. Now, what I'm doing now is I'm just giving it another mask that's blocking out what I just selected, which is all of the spires. And I did that using the Magic Select tool because I was really quick with it. Because remember, I'm trying to fit this under 15 minutes. So I Magic Selected it, gave it the layer mask, and boom, there you go. Now it looks like it's a background. So that's it for that. Now I'm just rearranging it to see what looks good. That looks fine. Yeah. So that now you got, your background, your middle ground, your foreground, and, your overlay. That doesn't really look all that good. And I'm going to realize that in about a second and change it back. And why am I not changing back? Okay, I guess I keep it that way. But, yeah. So you can get a little bit more advanced into this stuff. But right now what I'm doing is I'm just adding another final touch because I thought it needed it. So I make a 50% gray. I am dimming it down to only, like 10-15% transparency, which is like barely visible. And what that does, it's a good thing to do when you're making backgrounds, like wallpapers for either Windows, Mac, or whatever. Because when you're making a wallpaper, here's something that I realized recently. In fact, it was while I was making the wallpaper for The Park, which is one of my great juggling videos if you want to go back and look at it if you're not a fan of my juggling, is that high contrast wallpapers do not make good wallpapers. It's hard to see icons, and it's really, really just not good. It'll make for a great design, sure, but for a wallpaper, functionally, it's not going to work. So you throw in a nice 50% gray. You just bring down the contrast by adding that 50% gray and going with it. And I just spent a couple minutes and saved it. And now this is what I was talking about before. Those straight lines that were in the pillars, I got a little bit sick of them because I don't really like. This is an abstract wallpaper. I don't like straight lines in abstract wallpapers. So what I'm doing is I'm just polar coordinating it in different ways. Polar coordinates is a great tool, by the way. Learn to use it. Learn to use it well. So right now I'm just messing around, trying to make different curves, things that look interesting, and yeah, a lot of it is just play around, see what works and what doesn't work. So that's that. As you can see, the wallpaper is pretty much almost done already, and that right there is pretty much the last polar coordinate I do. Because now the lines kind of look, like they're separated, and I just flipped layers again. That way now it's background, middle, foreground again. So yeah, that's that. And I don't know, for some reason I didn't like it, so I'm doing a couple more things, but that's basically the gist of what happens to make this. Oh, what am I doing here? I am doing something. What the hell am I doing? Ah, yes, I know what I'm doing. I am, one thing is that you got to remember when you're making those striped backgrounds, like all the way in the back backgrounds, the Japanese rays, you have to remember to block out all of the layers, not just the spires, but the under layers as well. So yeah, that's it for that. Looks good. And yeah, now I'm just screwing around seeing what I can do. But again, yeah, that's about it. And then you just play around a little bit more. The wallpaper, for the most part, it's done. Now I'm just screwing around, turning things on and off, seeing what works, what doesn't work, whether it looks good or not. I think I'm going to change the transparency here in a second. Maybe. Nope, I'm saving. Okay, so that's about it. So now I save it as a JPEG, maximum quality, and boom, I'm done. And right click, and here's a picture of my incredibly unorganized 800 by 600 desktop, and set as background. Boom, there you go. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, looks good. As you can see, it's pretty high contrast, but it doesn't really look high contrast, so that's good. And that's my recording program in the bottom right for the screen capture software, which is now stopping, and the video is stopping as well. So thank you very much for watching this. Hopefully you've learned something. If not, I've got another great podcast for you to watch. It's called Pixel Perfect, and it features an incredible Photoshop artist named Bert Monroy. It's on revision3.com. Go check it out. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in my next video.